Hi everybody, welcome back. This is a BallFactory video for project number 3. And in this project what we're going to do is take a look in the code for the ball that's bouncing off each of the walls. So we did that by creating variables for location, and when we change the location by adding speed to both the X and Y direction, then we have animation. And we say when the ball gets too far to the left, go ahead and switch the direction of speed by multiplying it by -1. Or we say speed x is equal to negative speed x. And same thing when it goes off the top or off the bottom. When it reaches an edge, we just flip the speed either in the x direction or the y direction, and then the ball moves. And we stay inside the canvas. Today, though, we're going to say, what if we wanted to add more than one ball? What would I have to add to this code to have 2 balls, or 3 balls, or 1,000 balls? Well, let me go ahead and show you what that code would look like. Okay, so now I've had to declare a whole nother set of variables. So all of these variables were for ball 1, but now the next ball is going to have its own location. So I had to come up with 2 more variables, and its own speed. So I had to come up with 2 more variables there, and its own color. So I've got a whole set of variables for ball 1. I've got a whole set of variables for ball 2. And now I have to initialize all the variables for ball 1, and then separately I have to initialize all these variables for ball 2. Now, to draw this, I still only have 1 ball, so if I was going to go ahead and draw this, I have to copy all this code that I have for ball 1 to draw it on the screen, and now I've got to copy that over, and now I'm going to have, let's say, color 2. I'm going to have to change all of these 1s to 2s, and now all of a sudden I have 2 balls in 2 different locations, but I've had to double all of the code and come up with different variable names for each of these. And imagine if I have to do this just for 2 balls. What if I had 1,000 balls or 1,000,000 balls? And so there's got to be a better way to code. And so what we're going to do today is look at that better way. We're going to create something called a BallFactory. And the BallFactory is going to allow me to make as many balls as I want. And I'll be able to use the same speed and the same location and so forth for all of these different balls. Okay, so here's my starting code, and I'm going to create a BallFactory. And a BallFactory is not going to actually use the word factory, but it's just going to be a function called ball, and I'm going to use a capital B, which is just a convention, but it's going to let the programmer know that this is going to be a BallFactory. And I'm going to pass in parameters. I'm going to pass in values when I make it. I'm going to pass in an X, a Y, let's say I pass in a radius, and I pass in a color. So I need those values, so every ball that I make will have its own X, its own Y, its own radius, and its own color. And now I have to set those equal to what we call properties inside the ball. So every ball will have its own property. I'm going to say this dot xloc, and so, or locx like we did before. So we said just locx before, but now I'm going to set that equal to the guy that's coming in. So the input parameter is x, and I'm taking the value of x and I'm loading that from right to left into this new variable I call locx, and that is inside the ball. So every ball is going to have its own x signed in it. And so I'll do the same thing for, let's say I'll do the same thing for loc y, and so y is going to come in. And I could pass in the speed parameters, but you also have the option of just creating that right inside here. For instance, I could say this dot speed y, I'll just call it dy for short, but I'm going to do the same thing I did before, but it's going to happen inside this guy. So it's going to say random, and I'll give it a value between, I don't know, let's say -5, 5. Okay, so now it's going to have its own speed, because when I create a new ball, this is going to get called just once, this random, and it's going to make its own speed. And the same thing for dx. So we have this dot dx, this dot dy. I'll explain what the word this is doing later on, but right now this is just the syntax we use for JavaScript in the factory method. This is going to be a BallFactory, and it's going to make a ball every time I call it. And then the other thing I need to do is have this dot radius. I'll just say rad for short is equal to r. That's the input parameter r. And I'll say this dot, let's say CLR for color is equal to C. So every ball when I make it, it's going to get its own location, its own speed x, speed y, its own location x, location y, its own radius, and its own color. And so all the balls will have that information. I'll also need to draw this. And so rather than draw this up in the draw function, instead, I'm going to have its drawing inside. It's going to draw itself. We call that a behavior. And so we put this in here. I'm going to say this dot, let's see, we can't use the word draw. So I'm going to use the word render. Render. And so this is going to just be a function. And this function, I'm going to have parentheses. I'm going to have curly braces like always. And I'm just going to say, go ahead and draw my ellipse here. And so the fill, let's go ahead and say fill. This guy is going to have a fill color of this dot CLR. And that's it. So now we know that this guy, when we render it, he's going to have his own color. And he's going to have his ellipse. So I'll say just like before, ellipse is going to have an X location and a Y location. But it's going to be this dot X or locx, and this dot loc y, and its size is going to be this dot rad, and we're going to have this dot rad again. And so that's it. So now every time I draw this guy, he's going to have a size, he's going to have a location, and he's not going to be changing because I'm not going to do anything with his speed just yet. I'll do that later. But now if I run the program, nothing happens. And the reason nothing happens is I'm drawing it, but I haven't actually created the ball. And I'm not calling this function anyplace. So what we have to do is go back up to the top and create a variable. And I'm going to go ahead and say var. I'm going to say, let's just say ball1. And I have to initialize that. And this part, it's not bar, it's var. Sorry about that. So this guy is going to have a different location. So when I create a ball, I'm going to say ball1, and I have to say is equal to, and I'm going to use the new keyword. It's going to say new, and I'm going to say capital B ball, and this ball is going to create a new ball. Now, notice I have parameters coming in here. This is where I'm receiving values. If I'm receiving values here, I have to send them, and the way I send them is I have to send them up here. So let's give this guy a location 200, 400, and let's see, he needs a radius, so I'll say 30, and he needs a color, so I'll say color, and let's give him, I don't know, let's make the first ball red. So I'm just going to say 200, 50, 40. So that's going to be a reddish color. And now if I run it, still nothing's going to happen, because even though I've created this ball, I'm not calling this function render. I've got to call that function. And the way that I do that is back up in draw. All I have to do now is say ball, and I say ball1, and then I say dot render. Now that dot is an operator, and it's really important. In this kind of programming, to go inside of the ball, you use the dot. So ball1, we say, is an object, and to go inside of the object, we have access to the variables, we have access to the functions. And so every object can have variables or properties, and it can have functions. In this case, we just have render. To get inside of the object, I use the object name, in this case ball1, dot, and I give the name of the function. And that's calling the function render. Since it's in the draw function, it's going to be called 30 times a second. And now it's not moving anywhere because I'm not changing the speed yet. But what I want to point out is now when I want to make a second ball, I don't have to rewrite all this code. All I have to do is say ball2. And down here, I'm going to copy all of this stuff. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to paste it right below. And now all I have to do is say, instead of ball1, I just say ball2. And I have to give it its own, let's say its own location. Let's call this guy at 500, 200. And let's give him a different size. Let's make this guy 70. And let's give him a different color. So we'll make this guy green. So we'll say 250. So now, if I draw this guy, now I don't see it yet because I'm still not drawing it. All I have to do is call the render function inside of ball2. So now I'm still calling ball1. If I change this to a 2, now all of a sudden I should have ball2.render. Oops, I forgot the 2 up here. So now ball2 is rendered. I've got ball1 is a little red ball, ball2 is a big green ball. And if I want to make another ball, very simple. I just go ahead and say ball3. I do the same thing I did down here. I'm going to make one more ball. And now this ball, I guess we can make this one blue. So I just have to say ball3 here. I have to say, let's give this guy a different location, 100 and 500. And let's say this guy's going to be blue. So I'm going to say 222, and this guy's going to be 20. Okay, now all I have to do is render that. So I come down here, control this, control C rather, and I say render this guy, ball3. And now I've got 3 balls, and I didn't have to recreate all of this code. I just have to declare a new variable, create that ball, and each one has its own input values, and then I have to render each ball. And this is a much simpler way, and in what we learn next week, we'll be able to do this even easier. But this BallFactory idea is really important. So that's what we're going to be working on today. Next thing I'll do is I'll go ahead and add some code to move these guys around. Okay, so I'm going to first of all take this method render, and maybe it'll be simpler if I just copy it, even though I'm going to come up with a different function completely. The next function I need to do is to move the ball, and I'll just call this update. So I'm going to update its location, and I'm going to update its location every few minutes. I'm going to take that same code that we did every time I come in here, rather, I'm going to update its code, its location, and so to do that I just add speed. And so all I have to do is say this.locX is equal to, and again this.locX, and I'm going to add to that plus dx. That's equal to that plus this.dx. Don't forget to write the word this, and it's important for all of these things. So now if I do update, and I'm just going to do 1 ball in this video because it's getting kind of long. I'll let you do it to all 3 balls, but in terms of calling it. But now I've got the update is going to change this, so I'm actually changing the location of the function. So this update is equal to a function. It's going to come in here every time I come in. So I got to make sure I call this code, and to call this code I'm going to say ball1, for instance, dot update. And so now when I call the code, it's moving the ball because it's moving every time. Okay, the last function I'm going to add in this video is the function for we're going to say check edges. That same code I had with those if statements is now going to be in a third function. I'm going to call it check edges, and all this guy is going to do is going to have that if statement. So I had 4 if statements. Remember, it says if let's say this.locX is greater than, let's say, width. Okay, so just like before, except I have the word this in here now. If that's true, then I want to flip the speed. So I'm going to say this.dx is equal to negative this.dx. And so now this guy is going to flip the speed every time I do this. And I'll do the same thing. That's if it goes off the right side. What if it goes off the left side? In that case, I just have to flip the direction of this guy. So let's do that. And if it gets less than 0, then I just go ahead and flip it again. So now it should, and it didn't do that. So if this dot locX is less than this dot dx is, and we should see it bounce off. Okay? Oh, I have to check the edges though, so I'm not calling that. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's see, I've got back up here, I've got this dot render for ball1, this dot update, and now I have to say ball1 dot, and I have to use the term check edges. So I'm making a function call to this guy, and now when he goes off the edge, he should, whoops, but I've only got the x and the y direction. So, I'm sorry, the x direction. So now I'm going to do the same thing for the y. So I'll come over here, I'll just copy these 2 lines of code, and I'll just change all of the x's to y's, paste it right down below, and so I'll do the same thing for the y value. Here, I'm going to change y here, I'm going to change y here, I'm going to change width to height. And you do the same thing here for y. If y gets less than 0, then I want to change dy. I'm going to flip it from positive to negative. And it looks like I might be missing. There we go. Okay, so now this guy is moving all around, and I have to call this guy. I have to call all these methods. For ball 1, I have to call the method render, then the method update, then the method check edges. They don't have to be in exactly that order, but the point is that now I've got this ball moving in all directions, and so this ball function is done. I'm going to show you a little way to abbreviate all of this code, and I've got 3 balls now. I'm calling the methods in those 3 balls, and I want to have you guys make 3 balls moving around and bouncing off the edges. And that's it for today. Bye-bye.